Welcome to Backbone Unlimited. My name is Matt Hartsky. In this episode, we're breaking down why bears love edge habitat more than any kind of open country, and why understanding that single concept can dramatically increase how many bears you actually see on their feet during legal shooting light. If you've spent any time glassing bear country, you've probably noticed something. Wide open slopes look incredible. They look like magazine covers or Instagram. They look like where bears should be, and sometimes they can be, but more often than not, the bears you actually kill don't step out into the dead center of slopes at 5 p.m. They hug the timber, they use brush lines, they feed along transitions, and they appear where open meets cover. That's edge, and edge isn't random. Edge is survival architecture for bears. Food might exist in that open country, but security exists in the structure, and bears prioritize structure every single time. If you're not familiar with who I am, I've been hunting and guiding Western big game for over 34 years, and I've been a professional strength conditioning and nutrition coach for more than 30 years, and I'm here to help you become a more successful and consistent black bear hunter and outdoorsman. Let's start with a foundational principle here. Bears need calories, a lot of them, but they are not reckless in how they get them. Every feeding decision is a risk calculation. The question a mature bear is constantly answering is, how can I get maximum calories with minimal vulnerability? Open country offers calories, but edge habitat offers those calories with concealment, and concealment wins. Edge habitat is defined as the boundary between two habitat types. For example, timber and open slope, or clear cut and mature forest, maybe an avalanche chute and heavy cover, or oak brush and grass. Sometimes it's even a burn edge and green regeneration. Anywhere two vegetation types meet, you're going to create structural diversity, and structural diversity equals options for bears. Options equals survival. So let's talk about line of sight. In open country, a bear is fully exposed. If it steps into the center of a south-facing berry slope, it can be seen from opposing ridges or road pull-offs, glassing knobs, hiking trails, and that level of exposure is usually acceptable under low pressure. Under moderate or heavy pressure, though, it's risky. In edge habitat, the bear can step out partially, feed with half its body concealed sometimes, and retreat instantly, and then re-enter cover without traveling very far. It doesn't have to commit fully to exposure. It can sample the risk, right? And that difference is enormous. A bear feeding in open country must trust that nothing is watching it that can kill it, right? A bear feeding along edge only needs to trust that it can escape in 2 seconds. Which one sounds more consistent to you? Now let's talk about wind leverage. Edge habitat allows bears to scent check while they're feeding. If a bear is feeding along the timber line of a slope, it can keep wind quartering from the open and maintain cover behind, right? And then still retreat uphill or downhill. Open country often lacks that wind buffering, but edge habitat creates micro wind behavior. Timber edges break the wind, brush lines redirect the thermals. Tree lines create scent eddies that bears learn to read. Mature bears, especially, often position themselves along edge where they can monitor both open and cover. They can feed while gathering information, and information equals survival for them. Let's discuss thermals because thermal behavior changes dramatically along the edges. Early morning downhill thermals and afternoon upslope thermals often interact differently where the timber meets a slope. So, timber retains cooler air. Open slopes, those heat up quickly, and that temperature contrast can create subtle airflow patterns. Bears learn to watch for those patterns. An edge along the upper third of a slope might allow a bear to scent check downhill feeding zones before even stepping out. An edge at the bottom of the slope may allow scent from above to drift down predictably. Open slopes lack those same microthermal advantages. So edge habitat amplifies wind awareness, and bears live by the wind. Now let's talk about escape routes. Open country often has really limited escape layering for bears. A bear feeding 150 yards out into the open brush, he's got to cover a lot of ground to reach the timber. So it exposes him while he's retreating, and then he must also commit to one direction. A bear feeding in the edge has immediate access to thick timber, maybe downhill chutes, side hill contour benches, and often rock outcroppings. So that layered escape option for him increases his feeding confidence, and confidence increases daylight movement. That's why you often see bears feeding at the last 20 yards of timber rather than 200 yards out in the open. They're never usually more than a few seconds from cover. Let's talk about visibility from the hunter's perspective. Open country feels productive, right? Because it's easy to glass. You can dissect large slopes and you can see hundreds or thousands of yards, right? Or even miles sometimes. You can pick apart those patches of feed area. But edge habitat is a lot harder for hunters to read. Partially concealed bears can be behind just a bush or a little rock outcropping, and their movement is more subtle. Feeding occurs behind those little breaks. Hunters tend to gravitate towards what is easy, right? And what is visible. But bears gravitate towards what is secure. And that mismatch leads to a lot of hunter frustration. If you focus 80% of your glassing time on wide open slopes and 20% on edges, you're going to likely be reversing where bears are actually spending time, and you're going to miss bears. So spend more time dissecting transitions. You're looking for bears in brushy areas, right? Look for that movement in the brush and partial body exposure in that edge habitat because it produces bears that reward patience.
If you're serious about becoming a consistent Western black bear hunter, I've built something for you. The Bear Hunting ebook series is a complete progressive education system, 7 volumes that take you from mindset to execution. We start with foundations of reality, breaking down the myths and mental mistakes that ruin seasons before they begin. Then we move into bear behavior and movement, so you understand how bears actually live, travel, feed, and use wind. From there, we dive into spring bear hunting and fall bear hunting, green up, food shifts, pressure, and why bears seem to disappear overnight. Volume 5 teaches you how to read terrain, aspect, ridges, benches, and edge habitat like a professional. Volume 6 sharpens your glassing and scouting so you stop missing bears in plain sight. And Volume 7, that's execution, spot and stock strategy, wind control, closing distance, and finishing the encounter. Buy each volume individually or bundle them all to save 60% off at backboneunlimited.com.
Now let's talk about feeding efficiency. Edge habitat often produces higher quality forage than open centers. Why? Because moisture retention is better near the timber, right? Soil health is going to be stronger near the canopy breaks. Even in the fall, berry brushes near tree lines might retain moisture longer, and regrowth near burn edges is often more nutrient dense. Edge is not just security, it's often more of a nutritional advantage. So a slope's interior might dry faster in the direct sun, but the edge might stay productive longer, especially during late seasons. So let's talk about burn edges. Your post-fire landscapes create some of the most productive edge habitat in bear country. Burn meets green burn meets green regeneration, right? Charred timber meets berry growth in the fall. Open slopes meet residual cover. Bears often cruise those burn edges repeatedly. They can feed on new growth while still staying near that dead timber or thick resprouted growth patches. And in burn country, edge is everywhere, but not all edges are created equal either. The most productive edges are those that are going to connect feeding, bedding, and travel corridors. If an edge sits isolated without nearby bedding, it might see only nighttime movement. If it integrates with structure, though, it becomes a daylight hotspot. Now let's discuss pressure influence. In heavily hunted units, open country becomes risky pretty quickly. Bears will shift to edge earlier in the day. They might still feed in the open, but only near dark. If you're hunting pressured bears, edge becomes even more valuable for you because under pressure, bears are going to reduce their exposure distance. They're going to increase their use of timbered transitions, and they're going to compress their feeding windows. And that means edge habitat might hold more consistent daylight activity than just your open centers. If you see smaller bears in open country, but mature bears hugging edge, that's not a coincidence. That's also a hierarchy, right? Experience teaches survival, and those dominant bears are going to dominate the best feed and security areas. Let's talk about elevation integration into all this. Edge habitat along upper third benches often outperforms edge habitat at, let's say, valley bottoms. Why? Because your upper third edge is going to offer more wind advantage. It's going to offer a ridge escape option. It's going to offer downhill visibility, and there's going to be reduced human approach probability, right? Valley bottom edges often suffer from swirling thermals and more concentrated human travel. So your upper edges often provide more scent control, and that makes them ideal staging and feeding zones for bears. When you're glassing, don't just look at the obvious lower edges breaks along those ridge lines because that's where mature bears often appear first. Now let's discuss staging behavior. You've heard me use that word a couple times. Before stepping into full feeding exposure, bears will often stage along the edge. So they might stand inside the timber line, or they might be feeding partially, and they might pause more often or scent check, and they listen a lot. If you only watch the center of the slope, you're going to miss a lot of that staging behavior that you could be picking up on before they step out. Often the first sign of a bear is movement inside the edge. And if you can recognize staging behavior, you can anticipate the full emergence, right? If you miss it, you might never see the bear until it's already out and moving across somewhere. Edge habitat is often where feeding begins and ends. Open country is often where feeding peaks briefly or bears are just traveling through. Let's talk about those travel routes for a second. Bears rarely cross open slopes unnecessarily during daylight hours, right? They move along timbered edges. They like brush lines. They love contour breaks or even benchy transitions. Edge habitat often doubles as travel corridors for bears. It connects bedding to feeding. It connects drainage to ridge. It connects fingers to benches. And if you find an edge that runs laterally across a slope, you've likely found a good travel lane, and travel lanes produce a lot of consistent bear sightings. Open country produces more sporadic ones. Now let's talk about the time of day. Early evening movement often begins inside edge before spilling outward, right? Late morning feeding might retreat into the edge first before full bedding. So edges act as kind of a buffer zone. It allows bears to expand and contract their exposure window more gradually rather than just now you see them, now you don't. Open country forces commitment, right? But edge allows incremental movement, and that incremental movement increases daylight opportunity for hunters. So that's why a lot of bears appear at the very edge of timber just before legal light ends. They're expanding their exposure cautiously, not just stepping right out. Let's talk about hunting strategy within all of this edge habitat talk. If you want to capitalize on edge habitat, I would recommend glassing edges first, watching transitions carefully, looking for partial body exposure, not just whole bears, identifying upper third timber breaks, right? And then studying your bench edge intersections. Position yourself with wind advantage on those likely edge travel routes if you can, if you still have good visibility. And instead of sitting directly on feeding slopes, try to position slightly inside timber edge where you have visibility into the open. Those ambush edge travel spots are not just for the open feeding movements, right? When stalking, when approaching, use edge corridor as your concealment. Move within the timber lines rather than across open ground, and let the structure hide you. Now let's address a common frustration a lot of bear hunters have. A lot of bear hunters will say things like, I saw the bear in open, but it disappeared into the timber and it never came back. That's an edge advantage for the bear. If you don't anticipate where the bear entered the edge, you're going to lose that track and you're going to lose those sightings. Study the edge before the stalk. Identify likely re-entry points. If the bear retreats into timber along a specific brush break, you've got to reposition along that corridor rather than just charging blindly into the thick cover. The edge is going to predict the reappearance for you. Open country, it doesn't do that. Let's talk about morning hunts for a second within this context. Morning feeding might occur briefly along edges before full retreat into bedding zones, right? So if you're hunting mornings, you try to position yourself slightly below the edge. That way your thermals are falling downhill away from it. Watch where the edge meets the feeding slope because often bears are going to feed briefly near the edge and retreat before the sun warms up that slope too much. Morning edge movement can be really short, so you have to be ready. Finally, let's discuss mindset here within all this. Open country is really seductive, right? It's dramatic. It's easy to glass. It feels productive. Edge is a lot more subtle, and it requires a lot of hunter patience and discipline. It requires slower optics work, right, with your glassing. But edge consistently outperforms open country in daylight bear hunting because bears don't prioritize what looks best to us. They prioritize what feels safest to them. And edge offers food and cover and wind advantage, escape layering, maybe staging opportunity, and travel integration. Open country only offers food, right? And nothing else. So if you begin prioritizing edge cover over open centers, your sightings are going to increase. Your stock opportunities are going to improve. Your daylight encounters are going to increase because you're no longer hunting what looks good, you're hunting what bears actually prefer. Now, if you want to go deeper into Western black bear movement, pressure patterns, terrain positioning, and structured decision making, that's exactly why I built the Black Bear Hunting series of ebooks. It's a progressive system designed to help you understand how black bears actually use country and how to position yourself accordingly. I have a link to those ebooks in the description. And if you want ongoing access to the Team Backbone community, classroom, my full digital vault of black bear resources, private discussions, and direct communication to me for planning, you can join Team Backbone at backboneunlimited.com underneath our membership tab. Everything we talk about here is connected. Preparation is never a single video, it's a system. Thanks for being here. Until next time, train harder, hunt smarter, and never settle.